Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wellness Day, a podcast coming to every Wednesday from the Jahangir Wellness Center. My name is Kavas Jahangir. I will be your host again, if you will have me. I am joined here by the lovely Dr. Farzana. She is the head of neuropsychology at Jahangir Hospital, and we are here at the Jahangir Wellness Center studio and going to be talking about all things wellness, particularly the aspects of mental and emotional well-being and the aspects that doctor brings to the table. So we're going to be talking about all things fun, starting with, well, let me start with what wellness means to me, perhaps, and then we can take it from there. Is that okay with you?
Yes, certainly. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you, Doc. So for wellness, for me, I've got 5 pillars that I sort of build wellness on. And those 5 pillars are, and in no particular order or importance, that is nutrition, what you're eating, what you're drinking. What is that you're drinking right now? What do you have? Tea. Okay. Is it-
Sugarless.
Good. So that's nutrition, your movement. So example, if exercise, anything that would mean exercise to you, whether it's jogging, walking, gym, anything that's getting you moving is wellness. Third is your preventative healthcare. So that's what we do here, or partly what we do over here at the Jahangir Wellness Center, of your blood tests, your ECG, all those kind of things. The fourth is the emotional and mental well-being, which is extremely, extremely important, and unfortunately not talked about as much as it should be. So that is something that I'm keen to do with you. And the fifth is lifestyle. So that is your sleep, your recovery, your relationships, social aspects, work, hobbies, all that aspect. So all these 5 I look at together as wellness. So with that, thank you again for being here very much. And let me just straight by asking you, what does wellness mean to you?
Well, yes. In fact, in a nutshell, you have very nicely defined wellness, okay? And wellness and well-being go together, okay? These concepts are together.
Yeah.
So what generally wellness also means, it's a very positive term. When we talk about sometimes illness, we are meaning absence of illness.
Right.
But wellness means it's much beyond that, okay?
The presence of wellness.
Yes, well-being. and therefore, what does that mean? Okay, what does well-being mean? So it means people having a sense of fulfillment, a sense of satisfaction with life. They have their opportunity where they can contribute to work productively, either at work or to the community in
Yeah.
a productive, effective way. They can reach their potential as well as manage the everyday stresses of life well. So it's a hugely positive concept, well-being and wellness.
Okay. Well, let's take actually a step back before we get into that. I said that you are a neuropsychologist and you've been in this field for, I believe, I know over 20 years. Can you just quickly tell us what is neuropsychology?
Right. So neuropsychology, if you see, it's an amalgamation of 2 terms,
Right.
neuro and psychology. So we have a lot of neurological conditions like head injuries, stroke, dementias. These are the very commonly heard
Yeah.
neurological conditions. And each of these conditions affect the way we think, our cognition, and they also affect, our memory, how do we function in the day-to-day aspects. So when people have certain neurological conditions, like a head injury or a stroke,
Right.
their cognitive abilities, but also their emotional abilities get impacted and affected.
Okay.
So in terms of treatment and management, okay, we need to look at, and as a neuropsychologist, we do cognitive assessment to see what cognitive problems are coming after these sort of neurological conditions, but also how do we manage and get the people going and get back to a life, okay, whether it's their working life, daily life. And that's the role of rehabilitation in neuropsychology.
Yeah. So what are the most common problems that you see today? And well, before we even get to that, I'm glad that, since COVID, I found is that people are starting to talk about this a lot more, which is unfortunately, COVID is something that created that or partly created that, but I'm so happy that people are openly starting to talk about this mental aspect of well-being and things like that. Because earlier there was a taboo attached to it and things like that, but now that is going away and people are boldly talking about that. That makes me so happy, and which is why I'm happy to have you here today. So hopefully enlighten us with a little bit of more knowledge on the matter. So anyway, coming back to my question, I went off on a tangent over there. is that, yeah, what are the most common problems that you're seeing in this particular aspects of?
So you mean to say in terms of mental health?
Yes.
Because mental health is slightly different from neurological
Right, yeah.
conditions
So
and
perhaps
disorders that we
let's
see.
get to mental health
So
first.
yes, and then we will see maybe towards the end how it's also a bit related to some neurological
Absolutely, yeah.
conditions.
I will probably have to
Stroke
have you
and
back again for a
dementia.
couple of episodes to get through everything. But let's start with mental
Right.
health at
Yes,
least. Yeah.
yes. So, but in terms, so again, mental health is a very broad term,
Yeah.
and it's a positive term. And so, what includes in the definition of mental health is mental well-being, but also prevention of mental disorders,
Yeah.
their treatment and rehabilitation. And so it's a wider concept as well of well-being, where mental health is important for our day-to-day functioning, but also in terms of productivity and economic growth. So if you're looking at a wider society and economic level too. So mental health is very much tied in with our economic growth too.
That's true.
Yes, and worldwide, mental health disorders and illnesses are increasing. So we have 2019 data
Okay.
by World Health Organization, which says that in 2019, 1 in 8 people, or that's roughly about 970 million people worldwide, were diagnosed with mental health conditions.
Yeah. And that's only diagnosed.
Diagnosed, yes, and it's only for that year. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have every year millions of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
are getting added to it, and in India this mental health problem is surging. So we are not very far behind. And what we don't understand or we don't talk about mental health is that just as people can have any sort of physical disability.
Exactly. It's no different to anything else.
Yes, yes. And like if you have lost a limb and then there is a disability, mental health conditions also give you a disability where the person is not able to contribute and work effectively to the level that they were able to do before. Okay. So it creates a huge disability.
Yeah.
And in order to understand this disability, okay, there is a wonderful stats which is there. So World Health Organization has the stats where they say disability adjusted years lost. So what basically that means is that part of our healthy living, people who have mental health conditions, and particularly they have an estimate for India as well, that people are losing 2,443 years to disability from their healthy life per 10,000 population.
Okay.
So that's huge amount of disability which is we are losing in terms of years. Okay. And then that disability also impacts us on an individual, personal level.
I was going to ask that. How does that impact us on an individual level?
So that's like a lot of emotional distress to the individual, to the family surrounding. It results in lots of conflict, okay, and disruptions. So impacts people's relationship, families. We hear a lot of cases of now divorce, separation.
Yeah.
That has an impact on children and the entire family dynamic. So it creates a lot of social disruptions as well.
Right.
Not just a disruption at an individual level, but also at a social level.
But can you give us examples of some of these mental conditions that you're talking about?
Right. So there are different types of mental health conditions. Okay, so you must have people generally commonly hear about anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, alcohol, substance abuse. Okay. Of this, the most common type, okay, of mental health conditions that we are seeing is anxiety and depression.
Okay.
So COVID-19, what it did is that it made people aware about, but also willing to talk about, these conditions. So people are talking and they're also seeking help. So that's why we see a lot of anxiety and depression, okay, not just in our clinics, but we have a national health survey, okay, which shows that these conditions, in fact, have surged a lot.
Absolutely.
Okay? They were there prior to COVID-19, but they are surging and still there.
Because of isolation and various social changes and things like that. Absolutely.
Yes. So we have a number of factors which are contributing to that. Okay? Including urbanization. People are moving from one place to another, so they're getting disrupted. And when they move to a new city, they are isolated. You have work pressures are there, family disruptions are there, and then you also have now, people don't think that children and young adolescents have problems. So they have problems
And that's
too
growing,
because, yes, we have competitive exam systems and academic pressures. So there are a whole range of different factors which are
Right.
contributing to this.
So, yeah, let's get, you started talking about anxiety and depression as two most common mental conditions. How does one decipher whether it's just, a daily anxiety? For example, we were just talking about before the fact that we're on this podcast right now and then the camera's around. And that's something that gives you anxiety.
Lots of it.
So the question is, how do we decipher that that's just anxiety of the moment versus it being a more clinical condition? So how does one make that assessment?
Yeah, distinguish or separate
Right.
that out. And that's right. Okay, so there are a lot of everyday circumstances which can make people a bit anxious, a bit depressed.
Which is natural.
Which
I mean,
is
that
natural.
is
If you have lost a close relative, if there is an important exam to be given, there is a podcast to
cameras
be
on.
done. Yes, cameras
Hopefully,
on.
it's not too bad though.
It's not, so perhaps. So these things are natural,
Right.
which will give people some amount of feeling low, feeling lonely, feeling a little anxious. And then when the situation goes, okay, then these are temporary things. They
Yeah,
go
exactly.
away as well.
Right.
Also, we have to understand that all of us has coping mechanisms in place. We don't have to seek a mental health professional to, do that. So we have over the years learned to cope with difficult situations, and they're very nice. We might go to a movie to distract ourselves, have an evening out with friends if you're feeling
Yeah.
overwhelmed. So these are not normal and natural aspects. And then when people engage in these strategies, they feel better, the situation goes away, and things are back again, and the person is able to go back and do
Yeah.
what. So when we call that a person is experiencing anxiety, feeling sad, low mood, lonely, is part of a clinical syndrome.
Right.
So both depression and anxiety as clinical syndromes have a number of symptoms to them, okay? Like 10, 12 symptoms. Not everybody has to have all of them to be called that they are having depression or anxiety as a clinical symptoms. But if people have 5 to 6 of these symptoms, okay, these symptoms are lasting over a period of time, say 2 weeks and more. And people with their normal, coping mechanisms are not able to overcome these things, and they are adversely impacting our daily functioning. So one is not able to go back and do the domestic chores, does not feel like going back to work, can't concentrate at work. So when functioning is impacted, that's when we say that somebody is, experiencing what they're experiencing is either depression or anxiety.
And that sometimes can also, I suppose, manifest in other kind of diseases as well, in terms of how stress can manifest into other kind of diseases.
Yes, in fact, what we see in our clinics, and we also have a lot of data to support that, is that mental health, in fact, is a multi-pronged monster, okay? So it has its relationship to stress, and not stress as we casually mean it, okay? We are all stressed a little here and there, okay? But stress which is chronic and consistent stress, okay? Mental health is also related to or linked with what we call non-communicable diseases. So non-communicable diseases are, diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, okay? Stroke, it's, cardiovascular diseases are your non-communicable diseases. And it is also related to the lifestyle that we are leading. In fact, I feel the lifestyle that we are leading today, these factors are the glue between the non-communicable diseases, stress, and mental health.
What do you mean by glue?
Right. So to give you an example, okay, and they're all related in some very complex way, but just to give you an example, people are using, we went on social media to connect with people, okay, but the more we have been on social media, the more we are on internet, okay, what we see is that people who are longer than 3 hours on the internet, okay, are getting into a type of an addiction. And that addiction to internet and social media is akin to addiction like alcohol addiction.
I can well imagine that. I mean, I'm not saying I do it, but I can.
Well,
or maybe I do.
Well,
social media can be a
yes.
pit.
But yes, exactly. And then that disconnects us from people. So
Yeah.
then feelings of isolation, loneliness, low confidence, self-image issues all start creeping up because we see fantastic pictures on the social media, okay, and then we start comparing ourselves with it.
Yeah.
So it starts leading people to a sense of low confidence and image issues as
Yeah.
well. But also what we do is that we think, oh yes, we are very stressed, okay, so then I'm going to, a nice way of de-stressing is I'm going to be on the internet or scroll and see reels. And then the more we do that in the night, the more we are disrupting our sleep.
Sleep, absolutely.
Because the blue light which comes out
Absolutely.
and all of that, it's not good. It interferes with the melatonin. So then the sleep starts going away. And then when sleep is going away, we are not all that focused, attentive, and we are having a sleep epidemic also, or an epidemic of sleep problems.
And if
So
you can't go to sleep, you go back to your phone then. It's like a vicious circle.
Yes, and then in the end, your stress levels increase, okay? Also, when stress levels increase, people skip lunches, skip their meals, and therefore what happens at the end of the day, there is a very natural drive towards carbohydrate-rich food. So we are also having this whole shift in our diet where people are having high energy, high calorie-based and highly processed food and moving away from nutrient-rich food.
Right, right.
And then that also, so it's like that adds to our stress levels, but also when people are stressed, they are more prone to having these sort of foods. And we have a culture where it's very now cheaply and easily available.
Yeah.
So it's very multifactorial and they are all tied in.
And the
you know,
counter
with
it is
each
if you get those right, like what we were talking about earlier. If you get nutrition right, you're getting sleep right, it helps so much for your
Yeah.
emotional and mental well-being, as you're saying. It just gets it back on track without really thinking about it.
Yes,
No
and
pun
without-
intended.
Yes, absolutely. And what it also says is that it's all in our hands. It's modifiable,
Exactly.
okay? Because this is what we are doing to ourselves, not somebody else is doing to
Yeah.
us, okay? Or, it's like genetics. The risk of genetics is the same, okay, for heart diseases and hypertension and all of that. But when we are engaging in these lifestyle factors, okay, we are increasing our risk of hypertension, heart attacks, diabetes, and we see that in our young population.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely 100% in our hands, modifiable.
Preventable.
Yes, preventable.
So how do we do that? What are the best things we can do to keep it prevented?
Right. So before, I think people are very strategy and technique oriented, okay? But I think I would want to suggest something before we go on to that.
Yeah, please, because I'm that way, so it's good that if you can correct me.
Right, yes. I don't think so. We are all very different. But I think it's very important to note that we need, I feel, to take a moment and pause and think that what are we doing? How are we leading our lives? If we are stressed, why are we stressed? Okay? And stress is not always outside the deadlines and the consistent work pressure, but a lot of stress is how we think about things. Okay? So to give an analogy, do we want to be those rabbits which run the race fast, but then get fatigued faster, as against the tortoise?
Right.
So a lot of people have the thought process, I'm going to work damn hard till I am 40 and then retire by 45 and all the wealth that I've generated.
But you're burnt out.
Well, you've burnt out. There you've got it. Okay. So then it's based in how we think. What is important in our lives? What values are we working towards in our lives?
Absolutely, yeah.
So if we don't pause, how health is important paradigm in all of that, okay? So if we're not going to pause and think, oh, what life I'm leading, okay? What are the social pressures which are driving me to think this way? What are
Right.
the social pressures which are driving me to eat in a particular way, okay? What are the factors which are making me driving into going into social media? So if we are not going to pause and think, okay, then I think none of the strategies are going to be helpful because it's
Yeah.
all very individual as well. And there is a deeper background to it, okay? Because there's a huge social pressure now to think in a certain way, which is adding to our stress, eat in a certain way, or lead our lives in a certain way, which is adding
yeah.
to our stress, okay? So I think doing that is extremely critical, okay?
Just think.
Yes, just pause and
Right.
think, okay? What regrets would I have 10 years down the line? What things I
But would you translate that just beyond thinking? For example, I'll give you
Yes.
my example of how I or not example, but perhaps what I would do is that I would think and then I would overthink. But then what I've started doing, at least I found this to be very helpful, is something like journaling. So, which is why I came down to the question is that do you translate that thinking to journaling or any kind of coping mechanism is what we were talking about.
That's right. So journaling is a very nice way. Again, that's that pause and think
Right.
mechanism. So anything that
So that's what you
facilitates
mean, right?
that, okay? Doing that mindfulness is a very nice way of helping people pause, be in the moment in the current scenario. Otherwise, either we're thinking about,
Yeah.
the past or we are in the future. We are never in
Right,
the
right.
moment. So having these strategies, okay, of mindfulness, journaling is very important. But also, I think, picking up, looking at prevention, okay, as a technique. So maybe, coming and doing an annual checkup is a good way of seeing what's happening with our bodies. Because those results don't lie. They tell you something. So when young people are getting pre-diabetic, high cholesterol levels, then there's something to, pause
think
and
about
think
it.
back, okay? It's having an impact on ourselves. Otherwise, how do we know it's having an impact? And a lot of these things we don't discuss and talk about,
Yeah.
mental health. So I think doing a regular annual checkup is a good way of, getting these, red flags coming
Yeah,
up that there's
absolutely.
something we need to do as well. But I also feel that as mental health providers, okay, we have to think differently and think innovatively also. Because, as I said, mental health is a multi-pronged approach, okay, a multi-pronged monster. And there are several things related to it. So, for example, one of the things that we medical people get very upset is that, okay, people are doing a lot of reading and asking us silly questions. But in fact, if people want to read, then that's a very nice thing. So the
Absolutely.
way we adapt, or I have adapted, is that I provide people with a lot of resources. So if you provide people with the right resources, reliable places to go, then it's hugely facilitative. So people don't just come back and ask you right questions, but also they adhere to your treatment
Okay.
a lot more better as well, okay? And then they're not, moving from a doctor to another
yeah.
doctor, okay? So I think we need to think very innovatively. We also need to develop a lot of preventive programs, okay?
What kind
So-
of programs?
For example, the one that we run at Jahangir Hospital and with the Wellness Center is a group program for geriatric people. So
Okay.
we have a group of geriatric people who may have some common issues, and that's a very good way of reducing social isolation. So they're coming, being with a group, learning how to be much more physically healthier for their age, but also what are the characteristics and things, that would keep them mentally active, cognitively thinking, motivated,
Okay.
reducing loneliness. So it captures all of that, okay? And we run that program very regularly. We also have a lifestyle modification program, okay, which is a behavior modification program.
Okay.
Knowledge is one thing, it's great, it creates awareness.
You have to apply it.
Yes, but then it does not result in behavior
Exactly.
change. Behavior change is a different science
right,
altogether.
right.
So you need to be in the program to change
Okay.
that behavior. And then we find that people find it really very helpful and they're able to make long-term changes in their lives.
So it's
as a
nice that there's a
result.
community for that. That you create a community with these programs for that kind of thing.
Yes.
Very insightful.
Yes. So we need not just only be very medically focused in terms of treating the illness, but also preventive and looking at the wider mental and emotional aspect as
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
why somebody may be, being obese. Okay, then there is a lot of psychological aspect that needs to be looked into and things. And then if one has to change, then what one needs to engage in.
Very insightful. Final question for you, Doc. How do you deal with your mental well-being? How do you maintain it and how do you grow it?
Right. Okay. That's a very nice question and a very reflective one. Okay.
I'm making you think now.
Yes. Well, that's right. And I think one of the important things which I think one needs to do in life is to have balance. Okay. So a lot of our stress comes, it's just being work focused. One needs to have balance. So interest and hobbies. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I have interests and hobbies. I have my potting the plants and gardening and, just sitting out and looking at the trees and listening.
Not behind
to
cameras.
birds. Yes.
Not you don't like being behind cameras. That's not your stress
No,
buster.
definitely that's one of the stresses of my life.
Well, hopefully we've reduced that after today.
Yes, yeah, practice helps.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, engaging in interest and hobbies is a very important aspect.
Okay.
Taking breaks in life.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't plod on if things are, too tough. You learn to take breaks. Socializing, meeting friends,
Absolutely.
families, having that real connectedness. Just to let you know, I'm not on any social media for that matter.
And you look so happy.
So I know being on social media is important, okay, for businesses
Yeah,
and things like that. But it's important then, how do you learn to disconnect, okay? And sometimes not being is a blessing, okay? I'm there, but to a very minimal
Yeah,
extent, okay? So just like I have fear of cameras, I have fear of responding, okay, which helps me, I guess, over there. So I think, yes, interest, disconnecting from your gadgets and social interactions. They
Lovely.
are very powerful mechanisms.
Okay. Well, I know there's so much more that we can talk about. Talk about brain health, and we can get into far more details about the stroke side, the cardiac side, which we will definitely be doing in future episodes. I think we've got at least 5-6 episodes that we can do together on these matters. But thank you so much for being here and giving us a great insight on all these aspects on how we can help and grow that. And the fact that we're talking about it so openly is something that encourages us and something that we encourage at the Jahangir Wellness Center. So thank you for leading that effort, Dr. Mulla, and thank you for being here.
Yeah. And I think I would like to thank you and your team, because to think about a concept like this.
Well, our team.
Yes, we talk and have this conversation out there in the open is very important. So I think thank you to you.
Thank you.
As well,
Thank
Clovis.
you. Thank you for being here, and look forward to the next episode.